What's up, everyone? Jay here with Tap and Turn Gaming, coming at you today with another Battle for Zendikar spoiler video. So this is our Week 3 spoiler video. There are quite a few cards that got spoiled since our last video, so there is a lot for us to look at today, so let's just get right on into it. The first card we're going to look at is this guy, which a lot of you probably have seen this guy. He's a reprint from the original Zendikar. Felidar Sovereign, a 4/6 for 6 with Vigilance and lifelink, and at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 40 or more life, you win the game. Previously, this guy was a mythic rare. Now he's just a regular rare. But from an EDH standpoint, you know, this guy, he's very good. He's also kind of, you know, like one of those cards where you can kind of just, you know, put it down, and if your opponent doesn't answer it, you know, you kind of just win, which, you know, cards like that I try to stay away from personally. I mean, I think it's, you know, kind of lame if you just like drop a card on the board and just win the game just off of, you know, having it there. Those are the worst kinds of defeats for me anyway. I just hate losing to like a single card, you know, from it really just not doing anything but being there. You know, I don't mind if an opponent, you know, puts a card down on the board and just continuously smacks me in the face with it and, you know, damages me out, but something like this, I just, don't get me wrong, it's an excellent card. I just personally would stay away from cards like these, generally, when I play Commander. But, you know, there's no denying that this card is amazing, and Commander can be a, you know, definite win condition for you if you're playing a deck that gains a lot of life. Alright, next up we'll take a look at Prism Network. The card is in Korean or Japanese or whatever language this is, but we do have a translation here on the side, so it's called Prism Network. It's a 5-cost blue enchantment with the ability of Converge, which is essentially Sunburst from 5th Dawn, but it enters the battlefield with Hedryn counters equal to the number of colors spent to cast it, and then you can remove a Hedryn counter from it to tap target creature. Also, you can pay one mana of every color, sorry, to scry 3. So, I mean, from a commander standpoint, you have to play this in a 5-color deck because it's got the, you know, 5-colored mana symbols there. But if you are playing it in a 5-color deck, you know, it's definitely not a bad enchantment. Being able to remove counters from it to tap creatures down isn't bad. The Scry 3 is what I really like about it, but overall, you know, you're kind of forced to only being able to play this in a 5-color deck, so it really does limit your options of, you know, potential decks that you could put this into. Alright, next up we have Combe Hellkite. It's a 6-cost 4/4 dragon with flying. Naturally, all dragons generally have flying. It also has landfall, so whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, it deals, Combe Hellkite rather, deals 1 damage to target creature or player. If that land is a mountain, it deals 2 damage to that creature or player instead. Definitely not a bad card. Generally, when I see dragons, I go, oh, will this fit into my Kalia deck? You know, dragons, angels, and demons. This guy probably wouldn't put into my Kalia deck. He just doesn't seem that strong. Maybe from, you know, like a limited standpoint, you know, maybe if you're, you know, playing in the pre-release when this, when the set comes out, or the week before it comes out, rather, I could see this guy doing some work. Maybe even in Standard, I could see him doing work. And, you know, like a mono red deck, you know, every time you drop a mountain, you shock. So, I mean, I could see that being good in those particular formats from Commander. I feel like the card's a little bit weak. That's just me. I mean, 2 damage to a creature or player every time you have a mountain come down. If it's not a mountain, you can deal 1 damage. Yeah, the damage can add up over time. You know, if you're playing a deck that can ramp into a lot of, you know, lands and stuff like that, maybe a green-red deck. But overall, I like the card. I just feel like it's a little a little weak in Commander. Next up we have Undergrowth Champion. He's a 3-cost 2/2. If damage would be dealt to him while he has a +1/+1 counter on him, prevent that damage and remove a +1/+1 counter from him. And he has landfall, so whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on him. It's a pretty cool card. I could definitely see this being played in Standard. Not really too sure from a Commander standpoint. I mean, he can potentially get very, very huge. You know, I actually, this guy probably would go relatively well into my Titania deck because the amount of lands that I have enter the board in that deck in, in a single turn is kind of ludicrous sometimes. So this guy could definitely get huge and just be a beater. But other than that, that's really all that he is just a beater. I mean, he doesn't really bring anything else to the table other than he gets huge, and as long as he's got counters on him, he gets damage prevented to him. So, I mean, overall, it's a pretty cool card. I like it. Just, I probably wouldn't play it in Commander just because, creatures that I put into my Commander decks, I want them to actually, do something, like whether it be an enter the battlefield effect or have some sort of an ability that, interacts with other things that I have going on the board, or, whatever. This guy just gets big, and you can attack and attack and attack with him. Not saying that's a bad thing. I personally just probably wouldn't play this guy in many decks. Next up we have Planar Outburst. It's a 5-cost white sorcery. Destroy all non-land creatures, and it has Awaken 4, and you can cast it for its Awaken cost by paying 8. So basically, if you pay the 8 mana for the Awaken cost, you can also do what the card says and animate one of your lands and put 4 +1/+1 counters on it. I've said before, the Awaken ability doesn't really tickle my fancy too much generally in Commander. I don't really want to be animating my lands into guys because wrath effects are just such commonplace in Commander. But this is a wrath effect. So, I mean, this particular card, if you were to pay the 8 mana for it, you would wipe the board and then get, one of your lands as a 4/4. So, you would have a 4/4 guy on the board after all is said and done, as long as your opponents don't have any sort of, like indestructible creatures or shenanigans or anything like that. But it's, another sweeper, so it's definitely not a bad card by any means. Just gives you access to another sweeper card in the Commander format, which, I'm sure a lot of people don't mind. Sweepers, like I said, are such commonplace that, seeing a new one that you could potentially play is always, a pretty exciting thing, at least for me anyway. Next up we have Exalted Influence, another card in a foreign language here, but we get a nice little interpretation here on the side. It's a blue sorcery for 5, 4 and a blue, with Converge, so you get to gain control of target creature if its power is less than or equal to the number of colors spent to cast Exalted Influence. From an EDH standpoint, I feel like this card's pretty weak too, unless you're playing it again in like a 5-color deck, with that blue enchantment that we took a look at. A lot of creatures in Commander are gonna have generally, 3 or higher power from my experience. Yeah, there's, little utility creatures that do cool little things that you could potentially steal with this if you only pay 2 colors of mana to cast this. But, I mean, I would much rather play, something that costs less mana that just lets me gain control of anything, or any creature for that matter. There's things like Treachery, you have Vidalcan Shackles. Well, that goes off of the number of islands that you have, but that's a lot easier to, pull off. Overall, I mean, I don't really like the whole Converge mechanic. Like I said, it's just very, very similar to Sunburst from Fifth Dawn. But, if you're playing a 5-color deck, you I could see some people maybe cramming this into a deck for some, theft shenanigans. So overall, it's not a bad card. I just feel like it's kind of weak in this format, unless you're playing, more than 3 colors, because essentially, you want to be playing more than 3 colors to have a better chance of stealing something with this card. Alright, next up we have a new legendary creature, Sada Hedhryn Grinder. He's a 4-cost 3/3 legendary goblin ally, so Wizards did, grant my wish of there being legendary allies in this set. The fact that he's mono red kind of disappointed me a little bit, but he's pretty cool nonetheless. Basically what he does is whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only him, you copy that spell for each other creature that you control that spell could target, and then each one of those copies targets a different one of those creatures. So basically, let's say you cast a God's Willing on him. So, you can give him protection from any color that you want. For every other creature that you have on the board that you could potentially target with God's Willing in this scenario, that spell gets copied and targets every one of those creatures that it could target. So it's a really cool ability. I like it a lot. Just for the sake of not argument, but just to talk about an interaction. If you did cast God's Willing, let's say you had 5 other creatures on the board, you're going to give all those creatures protection from any color that you want. And God's Willing allows you to scry 1, so you're going to be able to scry 1, then scry 1, then scry 1, then scry 1. So, not only will that give your dudes protection, but, let you filter your top card multiple times. So that's, a pretty cool little interaction. I mean, the possibilities of interactions on this guy are, pretty limitless. So, overall, I really do like him. I could see him being put into specific types of decks that run a lot of instants and sorceries that target your creatures to protect them or make them bigger or whatever it may be. So I really do like this guy a lot. Next up we have Sylvan Scrying, a reprint. The last time that we saw this card was from 10th edition, not to be confused with Magic 2010. 10th edition came before that, I believe, but this is a pretty nice card. I want to say the price of this card right now is like $5, for an uncommon. So it's a pretty sought after uncommon, but it lets you search your library for a land card, reveal it, and put it in your hand for 1 and a green. So it's very good, and it's not just a basic land; it's any land. So I could see why this card is so heavily played and so sought after. But now we're getting a reprint of it, so that's always nice that they reprint cards that haven't seen reprints in quite some time. Alright, next up we have Stasis Snare. It's a 3-cost white enchantment, 1 and 2 white, and it has flash. When it enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls until it leaves the battlefield. So more or less it's kind of like a Journey to Nowhere for 1 more mana, but it has flash. So it's pretty cool. I like it a lot. Gives you access to more white spot removal, so that's always a nice thing. Next up we have Jeru Warcaller. It is a 5-cost 2/1 elf warrior ally, so I like it already, just the fact that it's an ally. But it has rally, so whenever it or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, creatures you control get +2/+2 until end of turn. I like this card a lot. If I get to build a tribal ally deck from this set, if they print, an enticing multicolored legendary ally, if that ally happens to be partly green, this card will definitely go into the deck. It's pretty nice, being able to give your dudes +2/+2 just off of this coming into the board, or whenever another ally enters the board under your control is just really, really sweet. I like it a lot. Alright, so next up we have Cythe Leopard. It's a 1-cost 1/1 with landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. I would probably never play this in Commander. It's just a 1-cost 1/1 that just gets bigger every time you landfall. I could see this being played in Standard, or even limited, pre-releases and stuff like that. Because, you could definitely make this pretty big off of multiple lands coming onto the board, especially if you're playing fetches and stuff like that. But from Commander, meh, I wouldn't play it. I do like the art on it, though. Oh, that's weird. That must be like a promo version of it. When I mouse over it, it changes. It's pretty cool. Alright, anyways, moving on to the next card, we have Void Winnower. It is a 9-cost 11/9 Eldrazi. Your opponents can't cast spells with even converted mana costs. And your opponents can't block with creatures with even converted mana costs. This card, I think it's pretty stupid, honestly. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people will be like, oh, that's awesome, that shuts down this guy, and 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 this guy, it's probably a really good card. I just think that, there's just something about it, I just don't like it. It just makes me feel like, Wizards is just running out of ideas for cards. The fact that they would put those types of put those abilities on a card. I understand that the Eldrazi are, huge epic monsters and they need to be overpowered, but I don't know. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are probably looking at this card and being like, oh, that's, going into this deck and I'm going to put it into this deck. I could see it being really, really good, but it's kind of like one of those cards, going back to Felidar Sovereign, where, this is like one of those cards that just makes it so that your opponents just can't really play the game. Well, I mean, they can play the game with cards with odd converted mana costs, but, that's just one of the things that makes EDH not fun sometimes, is when, people play cards that just, like, shut other players out and make it so that they can't play the game. And there's nothing more discouraging than that. And this card kind of, I look at it and it seems like one of those cards that would, make playing the game not fun, because it'll make it so that you can't do what you want to do. Unless you're holding cards in your hand with odd converted mana costs, or your creatures on the board have odd converted mana costs. But overall, I don't like the card. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a really, really good card. It's just, like I said, one of those cards that just makes it so that people aren't going to have fun when you play the game. If somebody drops this on the board, and now the other players in the game can't play half the stuff that they have in their hand, yeah, I'm sure someone could find a way to remove this guy off the board. But if somebody can't, you're just going to be kind of sitting there not being able to play certain cards that you want to play if they happen to have even converted mana costs. So that's how I feel about Void Winnower. Next up we have Conduit of Ruin. He's a 6-cost 5/5 Eldrazi. When you cast him, you may search your library for a colorless creature card with converted mana cost 7 or greater, reveal it, shuffle your library, and put that card on top of your library, and then the first creature spell you cast each turn costs 2 less to cast. He's got a pretty interesting ability. He's kind of like, what is it? That green guy, Fierce Empath, that lets you, fetch out a creature with 6 or higher cost. This guy does 7. I want to say Fierce Empath lets you put the guy in your hand. This guy lets you put it on top of your library. But the fact that he makes it so that the first creature spell you cast each turn costs 2 less to cast is very nice. I mean, that's essentially, when you're casting creature spells, it's almost like you have like a static Soul Ring on the board with this guy. It only works for creatures, but still, that's very, very good that he'll lower the casting cost of the first creature spell you cast each turn by 2. So that I really, really like. Being able to fetch up a colorless creature with 7 or higher mana cost. I could think of a few things off the top of my head that you could fetch up with that, like, Darksteel Colossus, any of the legendary Eldrazi's. I'm sure there's other Eldrazi's in this set. We just saw Void Winnower. He's 9 cost, so you could fetch him up with this guy. So he can fetch you up quite a few things if you happen to have them in your deck. What I really like about him is that lowering the casting cost of the first creature spell you cast by 2 every turn. I really like that. So next up we have Desolation Twin, another Eldrazi, a 10 cost, 10/10. When you cast him, put a 10/10 colorless Eldrazi creature token onto the battlefield. So he brings basically a clone of himself onto the board. So for 10 mana, you're getting 20 power on the board, which is no joke. This guy reminds me a lot of Broodmate Dragon. That would bring basically a copy of itself onto the board when you cast it. Actually, right down here, you can see cards that are very, very similar to it. Obviously Broodmate Dragon, then you have Armada Worm and Colony and Twin Grove. So overall, I really do like it. Would I play it in certain decks that I have? Maybe. The fact that you have to cast him, makes it a little bit more, challenging to get him on the board and get that token. If it was just when he entered the battlefield, it would be pretty broken, because then you could just flicker him in and out with, effects like that, like Deadeye Navigator, Ghostly Flicker, and just get ludicrous amounts of 10/10s on the board. So it makes sense that you have to cast him to get the token, but overall, I do like it. Next up, we have From Beyond. It's a 4-cost green enchantment that has Devoid, so it technically has no color, but it costs 1 green to cast. And this card's basically Awakening Zone, except it costs 1 more mana, and it gets you the 1/1 Eldrazi Scions that you can sacrifice for 1 colorless mana. But it also does have, you can pay 1 and a green and sacrifice this to search your library for an Eldrazi card, reveal it, and put it in your hand. That's pretty nice. So it's essentially Awakening Zone for 1 more mana that generates you 1/1s instead of 0/1s, and you can sacrifice it away to search for an Eldrazi and put it in your hand. So not only is it an Awakening Zone, it's also an Eldrazi tutor as well. So it's pretty cool. I like it. Next up we have another Eldrazi, Smothering Abomination, 4/3 for 4 with Devoid and Flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature, and whenever you sacrifice a creature, draw a card. I really do like the, whenever you sack a guy, draw a card. Being forced to sacrifice a creature on my upkeep kind of turns me off on the card a little bit, because if you run out of creatures, you got to sacrifice this guy away. So I could see this guy being pretty solid in like a token strategy where you have plenty of creatures to sacrifice away, or some sort of deck that maybe wants to have its creatures die to trigger effects, things like that. So I could definitely see this guy finding homes in certain types of decks. I don't believe I have any that I would put this guy in personally, but I really do like the fact that he, has some card draw to him, which is pretty nice. All right, next up we have Deathless Behemoth, another Eldrazi, a 6-cost 6/6 with Vigilance. You can sacrifice 2 Eldrazi Scions to return him from your graveyard to your hand. Activate this ability only time you could cast a sorcery. So you could potentially, continuously get this guy back over and over and over. Just from a commander standpoint, he's basically just a 6/6 beater with Vigilance. Unless you're specifically building like an Eldrazi deck that's going to generate you lots and lots of Eldrazi Scions, it's probably going to be very, a scarce thing to see this guy keep coming back to your hand in a commander environment. Unless, like I said, you're playing a ton of Eldrazi's in a deck or something. Maybe you're building a tribal Eldrazi deck, that generates lots of Eldrazi scions. But basically, this guy is just a 6/6 beater with Vigilance, so he's kind of meh. Alright, next up we have Transgressed the Mind. It's a 2-cost black sorcery with Devoid, so it's technically not black. It's colorless, but it costs 1 and a black. And target player reveals his or her hand. You choose a card from it with converted mana cost 3 or greater and exile that card. Pretty nice card. I could definitely see this being played in certain types of decks. I could also see this being played in Standard. Being able to rip any card out of your opponent's hand with cost 3 or greater and exile it is pretty nice. Alright, moving on, we have Brutal Expulsion. It's a 4-cost blue and red instant. Well, it costs a blue and a blue and a red, but it has Devoid, blah blah blah. But this is a very nice spell. You get to choose one or both of the following modes: return target spell or creature to its owner's hand, or it deals 2 damage to target creature or planeswalker. If that permanent would be put into a graveyard this turn, exile it instead. So really, really nice card overall. Why wouldn't you choose both things on this, right? I mean, you could not only bounce a creature or a spell to its owner's hand, so it's essentially like you're playing a Venser Shaper Savant. It kind of has that same effect where you could cast this in response to someone casting a spell and bounce the spell to their hand. Or, a creature that's already on the board, with the fact that you can shock a creature or a planeswalker, and then if you kill a planeswalker that way, it gets exiled, so that's pretty nice. I definitely like this card a lot. Next up, we have Fathom Feeder. It's a 2-cost 1/1, a blue and a black, for a 1/1 Eldrazi drone with Devoid, Death Touch, and Ingest. So, Ingest is that ability where if this hits your opponent, they exile the top card of their library. And then he has an ability where you can pay 3, a blue and a black, to draw a card. Each opponent exiles the top card of their library. So, pretty nice, a little 1/1 guy that can basically kill anything in combat, and also gives you card draw. So overall, I like him a lot. Alright, next up we have Ulamog's Nullifier. He is a 4-cost 2/3. He costs 2, a blue and a black, for an Eldrazi processor with Devoid, Flash, and Flying. And when he enters the battlefield, you may put 2 cards from your opponent. You may put 2 cards your opponents own from exile into their owner's graveyards. If you do, counter target spell. So this guy works very, very well with the Eldrazi's that have Ingest, or the ones that allow you to, have some sort of an ability where you can exile cards off of the top of your opponent's deck, like the previous guy that we just looked at. The what was it, Fathom Feeder? This guy lets you pay 5, draw a card, and each opponent exiles the top card. He also has Ingest. So Ulamog's Nullifier works very, very well with cards like that. The Eldrazi's that ingest your opponent's deck, or, or any card that you exile. I mean, it doesn't have to be off an Eldrazi. You could cast something like a Curse of the Swine and, exile a bunch of creatures off your opponent's board, and then you can flash this guy in, put 2 of those cards that you exiled into their graveyard to counter any spell. So overall, it's a really cool card. I could definitely see this, being played in decks that are heavy on counters, and that also have, multiple ways to exile things from your opponent's side of the board or off their deck or whatever. So overall, I really do like this guy. Alright, next up we have Herald of Kozilek, a 3-cost 2/4, 1 a blue and a red, for an Eldrazi drone with Devoid, and colorless spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Pretty basic. So not too much to talk about this guy. Alright, next up we have Catacomb Sifter, another Eldrazi, a 3-cost 2/3 for 1 a black and a green with Devoid. Whenever he enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Scion creature token on the board with the whole sacrifice, get 1 to your mana pool. And whenever another creature you control dies, scry 1. I really do like that ability. It's kind of like, I believe it's Reaper of the Wilds, that had a very similar ability to that. So I mean, a 3-cost 2/3 that brings a friend and lets you scry whenever a creature you control dies. I like it. I like it a lot. I would probably put this guy in my Prosh deck for sure, or even maybe my Gliss of the Trader deck as well. You know, just being able to get that scry off of things dying is really nice. Next up we have March from the Tomb, which is actually a card that when I saw it, I was very excited for. It's a 5-cost white and black sorcery. Return any number of target ally creature cards with converted mana cost 8 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So when I saw this, I was really hoping that they printed a legendary ally that is white and black. I'm hoping that they make one that's at least 3 colors. You know, there is one that we're going to take a look at next that is a 2-color legendary ally. But I'm really kind of hoping that they make one that is black and white and then maybe one other color. So overall, I really do like this card. It has the potential to resurrect lots of allies out of your graveyard straight to the board. From an EDH standpoint, we'll have to see what other ally creatures that they print. I would be very disappointed if I don't get to play this card in like a tribal ally deck for Commander, because it just screams like, you know, play me if you're playing allies. So overall, I really do like the card a lot. Alright, so next up is the legendary ally that I was talking about. We have Munda, Ambush Leader. He's a 4-cost 3/4, 2 a red and a white for a legendary creature core ally, and he has haste. And he also has Rally, so whenever he enters, well, he or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, you may look at the top 4 cards of your library. If you do, reveal any number of ally cards from among them. Put those cards on top of your library in any order, and the rest on the bottom in any order. Honestly, I'm not really digging this guy. He is an ally, he's a legendary ally, but his ability just isn't doing it for me. Yeah, being able to, you know, look at your top 4 and then put, you know, any and all allies from among them, you know, back on top of your deck, you know, in the order that you want. So it's pretty similar to like Goblin Recruiter. Just the fact that they don't go into your hand, they go on top of your deck, I feel like is a little underwhelming. You know, it kind of gives away a lot of information to your opponent, like, oh, hey, look, this is the, you know, the next couple of cards I'm going to draw, so you know exactly what they are. You know, if you have them, you know, if they went straight into your hand, I would probably like this guy a little better. But overall, he's just not really doing it for me. I mean, I like the fact that he's a legendary ally. Just that ability just really doesn't do it for me personally. But, you know, if any of you else feel differently about him, you know, let me know in the comments section below. Just for me, from an EDH standpoint, you know, like I've mentioned many, many times, I really want to build a tribal ally deck for Commander when the set comes out. But I probably wouldn't build it around this guy. Maybe I'd put him in the 99, but probably wouldn't make this guy the Commander. Alright, so next up we have Bring to Light, a 5-cost blue and green sorcery with Converge. Search your library for a creature, instant, or sorcery card with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of colors of mana spent to cast it. Exile that card, then shuffle your library. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Pretty cool card. But it's got that, sunburst-ish type ability where, to really get something impactful, you would want to play this card in like a 5-color deck, so that you could search for a creature, instant or sorcery with convert a mana cost 5 or less. Yeah, you could definitely find some really cool stuff for, 3 or less, or maybe even 4 or less, but overall, just that converge just doesn't really make it too enticing for me in Commander, me personally. To get something very, very impactful, you would want to play this in like a 5-color deck. But like I said, there are cards that, people would want to fetch out that cost, 3 or less, maybe even 2 or less. So, I personally, not really digging the card too much, but, maybe some of you feel differently about it. Maybe you're excited for this card. So yeah, let me know in the comment section below what you guys think of this card. Next up we have Royal Spout, a 3-cost white and blue sorcery. Put target creature on top of its owner's library. Pretty basic, but it also has Awaken 4, so if you cast it for 4, a white and a blue, you get to animate a land into a 4/4 guy, and put a creature on top of its owner's library. Yeah, it's pretty cool, being able to get a creature off the board temporarily and put it on top of your opponent's deck isn't a bad thing by any means. If it were, put it or shuffle it into their deck, or maybe put it on the bottom, I, might like it more to play it in an actual EDH deck. But overall, it's not a bad card. Next up, we have Grove Rumbler. He's a 4-cost 3/3 with trample and landfall. So when you landfall, he gets +2/+2. So he definitely could go in and do some damage for you to your opponent. Especially if you're ramping into a lot of lands, you can make this guy friggin' huge. If you play a fetch land and you landfall, now he's a 5/5. You crack that fetch land, get another land off of that. Now he's a 7/7 with trample. He can get pretty big pretty quick, and the fact that he's got trample means that he's probably going to hit your opponent and do some damage. So, definitely not a bad card, but, like I said before, I really want cards in my deck that do more things than just attack and turn sideways. So, not saying this guy's bad by any means. I probably just wouldn't cut him into a deck over something else that might, actually do something other than just get bigger and attack. Next up we have Grove Tender Druids. It's a 4-cost 3/3 Elf Druid ally. Costs 2 a green and a white with Rally. Whenever it or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1. If you do, put a 1/1 green plant creature token onto the battlefield. Pretty good token generator, if you're playing a lot of allies. So, if you invest 1 extra mana into every ally that you cast, you have it bring a 1/1 green plant creature friend. So, it's a pretty cool card. I like it. I could see myself, putting this into said tribal ally deck if I do get the chance to build one. So, pretty cool card overall. Next up we have Drana's Emissary, a 3-cost 2/2 with flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. It's 1 a white and a black for a 2/2. Pretty cool, from a commander standpoint, it's kind of meh. From standard or limited, I could see this doing some work for you. The fact that it's each opponent is a little bit more enticing. Maybe you'd play this in a deck that likes to, drain everybody's life slowly but surely. But me personally, I don't really have any decks in my possession that would really benefit from having a card like this, really. So, a card might find a home in some EDH decks, but for me personally, it probably would not. But, I mean, overall, I like the card. It's not a bad card by any means. Next up we have Resolute Blademaster, a 5-cost 2/2 for 3 a red and a white with Rally. Whenever he or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, creatures you control gain double strike until end of turn. Now this guy I really, really like. Just off of, I mean, even if you're not playing allies, this guy is pretty sweet. Just off of casting him, you get a 2/2 body on the board and give your entire team double strike. So that's pretty nice. And it's a very Boros type ability too, seeing as this is a red and white card. So overall, I really do like this guy a lot. And you know, again, if I do build a tribal ally EDH deck, this guy will surely go into it if the if the colors of the deck allow me to play him. Next up, we have Skyrider Elf, a Elf Warrior ally for a green and a blue and X. It's a 0/0. It has flying and converge, so it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each color of mana spent to cast it. So generally, naturally, if it didn't have the X cost, the biggest this could get would be a 2/2. But you know, if you dump additional colors of mana into that X cost, it'll get bigger. So you know, not really too enthused about this card. It's more or less just a, at the very least, it's a 2/2 flyer. You know, if you dump other colors of mana into it, you can make it bigger, but more or less that's all it does. It's just a flyer that can potentially get bigger than a 2/2. So overall, from a commander standpoint, it's kind of meh. Next up, we have Hedra Network. It's a 4-cost artifact. When it enters the battlefield, exile all creatures with power 5 or greater as long as this remains on the battlefield. This is a very nice card for commander. You know, because creatures with high mana costs, you know, big splashy creature spells and stuff like that, are probably going to cost 5 or more mana. So having this, having access to this rather, in any deck, because it's an artifact, is a very nice thing. So, you know, being able to answer everybody's big splashy stuff is a pretty nice thing to have. So overall, I really do like this card, and I would probably personally play it in some of the decks that I have in my possession. Next up, we have Shrine of the Forsaken Gods. It's a new land, taps for a 1, or you can tap it and add 2 to your mana pool. Use this mana only to cast colorless spells, and you can only activate this if you control 7 or more lands. So kind of similar to Temple of the False God, except you can only use the 2 mana that it can potentially generate to cast colorless stuff, but it can tap for 1 as well. Overall, you know, kind of meh. You know, if you're playing a lot of colorless stuff in your deck, this could definitely do some work for you. Maybe you're playing a Karn Silver Golem deck, or you know, Bosch Iron Golem, or you know, a colorless general. This would be a pretty solid card to have in your mana base. But other than that, it's a little underwhelming. Alright, next up we have one of the new man lands in the set, which is pretty exciting, Shambling Vent. It's the black-white man land, and you can animate it into a 2/3 white and black elemental creature with lifelink for 1 a white and a black. So that's pretty nice. You know, who doesn't love man lands? So, you know, pretty much any deck that I have black and white in, I would probably play this in. Next up is another man land, a green and blue one, Lumbering Falls. You know, taps for green or blue, and you can animate it by paying 2 a green and a blue, and it becomes a 3/3 green and blue elemental creature with hexproof until end of turn. So, very nice there. Alright, so those are the 2 new man lands that we're getting in this set. Naturally, there probably will be more. They just haven't spoiled them yet, but the fact that the man lands are back is a pretty exciting thing. Alright, and next up we're going to take a look at 2 new really exciting cards new to the set that were just spoiled. New Planeswalkers, so let's take a look. The first one is Kiora, Master of the Depths. She is a 4-cost blue and green Planeswalker with 4 loyalty. Her first ability is +1, untap up to 1 target creature and up to 1 target land. really nice. You know, kind of like a little bit of a Garrick type ability with untapping the lands and you know, untapping a creature as well. You know, just by adding a loyalty counter to her is, you know, not a bad first Planeswalker ability. Her next one is -2. Reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put up to 1 creature card and/or land card from among them into your hand, the rest into your graveyard. So, you know, look at your top 4. If you have a creature and a land card in there, you can put them both into your hand, or if there's just 1 land card, you can put that in your hand, or 1 creature that into your hand. So, again, really solid ability there as well. And her emblem ability is -8. You get an emblem with whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may have it fight target creature, then put 3 8/8 blue octopus creature tokens onto the battlefield. It's a very powerful ability. So basically, you get you -8, you get that emblem, and then once you put that emblem on the board, then you put 3 8/8 blue octopuses on the board, which is going to immediately trigger the fight trigger on the emblem. So each one of those 8/8 blue octopuses is probably going to kill something. So it's a really, really nice emblem ability that she has. And then, you know, every time after that you have a guy enter the board, it's going to fight something. So definitely pretty powerful card, I would say. I really do like her a lot, and I could definitely see myself playing her in some decks that I have in my possession for sure. And the same is very, very true for this next Planeswalker, Hob Nicholas Reignited. He is a 5-cost black Planeswalker with 5 loyalty. You can +1 to draw a card and lose 1 life. So basically kind of like a Phyrexian Arena for his +1. And then his next one is -3, destroy target creature. Any creature, no color, sorry, I'm just fubbling words like a little child. You know, no color, damn it, no color restriction. There we go. Now I can speak. So, you know, +1, draw a card, lose a life. -3, destroy any creature. And then his last ability is -8. Target opponent gets an emblem with whenever a player draws a card, you lose 2 life. So that could definitely hurt a lot in a multiplayer game. And that counts for the cards that they're going to draw too, because it's whenever a player. So whenever they draw a card, they're going to lose 2. Whenever you draw a card, they're going to lose 2. If you're playing multiplayer, you know, they're going to lose 2 life all around, all day, once you get that that emblem on them. So this guy I will put into every single solitary deck that I have that has black in it, because he draws you cards, he kills guys, and makes it hurt when anybody draws cards for whoever you give the emblem to. So I really like this guy a lot. I really, really do. I want to put this guy into every deck that I have that's got black, without a shadow of a doubt. Alright, and lastly, for some of the new cards that we got here, I kind of skipped over it, but we'll take a look at it now. We have Green Warden of Marasa. He's a 6-cost 5/4 elemental. When he enters the battlefield, you may return target card from your graveyard to your hand, and when he dies, you may exile it. If you do, return target card from your graveyard to your hand. So more or less just a big-ass Soul Warden that you can also trigger again when he dies, and exiling him from your graveyard to get another card back. So pretty nice. I really do like it. You know, basically getting another Soul Warden. I'm sorry, not Soul Warden. I think I said Soul Warden. Eternal Witness. You know, getting that that card recursion back is very nice. And the option of exiling him when he dies out of your graveyard, you know, is there, so you can get another card back. But just off of him entering the battlefield, you can trigger that. So You know, blink him, do whatever you want to do, bounce him, recast him, you know, get cards back for days. And he's a 5/4 body, so that's not bad by any means either. Alright, so lastly, we're going to take a look at some of the new Zendikar Expeditions that were spoiled. So if you watched last week's video, you saw the end portion of the video where I talked about the Zendikar Expedition lands, which are, full art premium foils that you can potentially pull in Battle for Zendikar packs, which are basically reprints of, bomb diggity lands that have been printed in the past. So let's take a look. Let me just scroll down here. Sorry about that. And here we are. So Zendikar Expeditions. So the new ones we have are Misty Rainforest, one of the original Zendikar fetches. Another new one is Temple Garden and Flooded Strand. I believe those are the only three. Yes, those are the three new ones that were spoiled. These three right here. So obviously, I mean, we knew the Ravnica Shocks were coming back when we saw Steam Vents and Hallowed Fountain and Godless Shrine. Well, now we see the art on Temple Garden, and Flooded Strand is Onslaught / Khans of Tarkir block fetches. And then Misty Rainforest, which was from the original Zendikar block. So more Zendikar Expeditions being spoiled. So that's pretty exciting. The art on these is pretty amazing. When Derek and I get our booster boxes, I really do hope we pull some of these so we can more than likely sell them away and maybe, just get another box off of it. Because, like I said in the last video, Star City Games is already doing pre-orders on a lot of these, and some of the prices on them are like $150. So, yeah, I could definitely see these going for a pretty penny for sure. But yeah, that about wraps up the video, guys, here for week 3 of our Battle for Zendikar spoilers. So I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think of these cards that were spoiled. What you like, what you dislike. Stuff that you would definitely play in Commander, things of that nature. Leave me some feedback in the comments section. I really do love to read your comments and your suggestions. But yeah, this has been Jay with Tap and Turn Gaming. Again, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff, and we'll catch you later. Thanks a lot for watching.